Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Charmed Season 3, Episode 4, All Halliwell's Eve. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief summary and reminder about what happens within this episode. So the episode opens with the sisters dressed in their Halloween costumes, with Daryl and Leo getting ready for Halloween and to celebrate the holiday at the club. And as they are getting ready, we then see Cole meeting with the Grimlocks, who have taken advantage of the thinned veil, which allows demons who know how to come back in order to seek revenge on the day of Halloween. And Cole basically tries to warn them off, but they decide to go ahead with their attack anyways, so Cole then says he has to move up his timetable. We then, in the kitchen, have Leo looking up as he hears the jingle from the elders, and he then tries to warn the sisters of something. Just as the Grimlocks come in, Piper manages to freeze them, but then the three sisters, sucked into a portal which takes them to the past, leaving Daryl and Leo to face the Grimlocks without them. We then go into the past, where the sisters are very out of place in their very glittery and Halloween costumes, and they initially get chased by some witch hunters, but one of them, who Prue seems to have a connection with, lets them go. They then are found by the witches of the coven that summoned them, who had asked for the greatest good witches of all time to help them save a woman named Charlotte, who is about to have a baby, who has been kidnapped by Ruth, who wants to basically raise the baby evil. And the sisters initially are full of their cocky confidence, and they go to try to save the child. However, then they fall prey to the magic of the time and realize that they don't have their active powers in this time period because their powers don't exist yet. Which then, of course, leads them to having to learn the magic of the time and connect with it before they are then able to return. And they do manage to save Charlotte, create a protective circle in which she can give birth peacefully without issue. Unfortunately, while the barrier keeps out evil, it does not stop bullets, which is why Phoebe then decides to embrace the cliche and accidentally become the source of the cliche when she puts on a cone hat, like the classic witch's conical hat. Conical, that was the word I was looking for. Puts on the conical hat and uses the broom to basically fly across the moon while attempting a cackle. This, of course, scares all of the hunters away, and Cole, realizing that he is lost now that they have connected, returns to the present time, and then the sisters return to where the coven is hiding out and find out that the baby that they saved was actually their ancestor, Melinda Warren, that we saw in The Witch's Back, who is also the source of their powers in the future. This, of course, is a happy ending. They then get sucked back through the portal. While they've been in the past, Daryl and Leo have been running from the Grimlocks. They've found the potion in the Book of Shadows. Leo then has made the potion, and he manages to kill one of them before the girls come back. However, once the sisters come out of the portal, he's struggling with the second vial, which is smashed on the floor. Luckily, Prue is able to move the potion into the Grimlocks, the second Grimlock's face, saving Leo. Daryl, unfortunately, at some point when he was running away from the Grimlocks, did end up losing his sight, but luckily Leo is able to heal it. And then each of the sisters go to the club. Daryl decides to stay behind because he's learned a lot, including that Leo is a white lighter, which he had not known previously. And at the club, Prue meets a man who is identical to the guy she had a connection with in the past, so they go off to dance. Cole arrives ironically dressed as an angel, and obviously he and Phoebe then go off to dance, and or not Prue, Piper and Leo also enjoy their time at the club, and this is how our episode ends. So now that we've been reminded about what happens within the episode, it is now time for us to rank the episode. As a reminder, on this channel we rank on two lists, our mostly objective ranking list and then also the personal ranking list. So as always, we start with our mostly objective rank values, and I've highlighted those I felt applied to this episode. The first, of course, is that we have our single episode supporting character introductions, and that, of course, has to do with Ruth Cobb, who is our time period specific villain, who is trying to steal Charlotte's baby to raise it in the ways of evil so that good magic will not thrive in the new world, i.e. America. We then have Ava, who is kind of like the leader of the coven that Charlotte is a part of. And then we have Charlotte Warren, who of course is Melinda Warren's mother, who has been kidnapped by Ruth Cobb. And then we also have the love interest, kind of, which is Micah in the past and then Mitch in the present. I say kind of a love interest because, as we know, some supporting relationships are kind of just a flirtation, and they last all of one episode and are never seen again, which is once again the case in this episode. We then have our multi-season supporting character development, which is worth 3 points, which is, of course, where Daryl learns about Leo. We also find out that apart from the succubus, which he saw very briefly before he knew about the supernatural, the Grimlocks are the first demons that he's actually seeing. He knows of their existence. He's helped the sisters on some cases, but this is the first time he himself is facing them. And they, of course, are immune to his bullets. And then again, he learns about Leo, so there's that development for him. And then worth 4 points, we have some world building, which is where we learn that Halloween thins the veil to allow the demons who know how to seek revenge and return to the world of the living for one day. Of course, we also see that because they are returned to the world of the living, they are then able to be revanquished. We then also have the fact that Phoebe, in this universe at least, is responsible for the cliche of the hook-nosed hag witch flying across the moon on a broomstick with her conical hat. Although I do, kind of as an aside, want to mention that her cackle needs work. It was not a great cackle, but that brings us on the positive side to a total of 11 for this episode. However, as always, we have to call out the negative messagings and behaviors. And obviously, Charlotte was kidnapped and her baby was being attempted to be stolen. This is done by somewhat of a villain, but it's also considered to be an evil witch practitioner. She's not a demon. So I did feel that it did apply to this episode, which then brings this episode on our mostly objective ranking to a 9 out of 10. So then, as a reminder of our Season 3 rankings so far, on our mostly objective ranking, in first place we have The Honeymoon's Over. Second, Magic Hour. This episode, All Hallowell's Eve, falls into third place. And then in fourth, Once Upon a Time. So for my personal ranking, I firstly want to say that I didn't think that there were really any negatives about this episode. I loved pretty much everything about it. I love their wardrobe, like the costumes that they go back in time with. They really went all out. Prue is like some sort of witch fairy that's black but with flowers and butterflies and vines painted on. Piper is Glinda, so she has a big poofy pink dress. And then Phoebe is Elvira, Lady of the Dark, or Mistress of the Dark, whatever the case may be. I also like how when they go through the portal, they leave their wigs behind, so when they get to the past, they have their natural hair, and of course are very out of place, all of them in these flowy dresses that are completely out of place for the time period. I, of course, love that they're time traveling. I like the way that they learn the more like, for example, like Wicca as a religion, kind of how that those types of altars and rituals work versus like active powers witchcraft. They learn more like the I don't know how to say it because there are people who still practice that type of thing today, so I can't say old-fashioned witchcraft, that wouldn't count. But I guess in that universe, it's the old-fashioned witchcraft because in the modern day they have their active powers and they have lost touch with the knowledge of the past and how magic was used then before the active powers. And that is what they are getting in touch with to bring back to the present with them. I also like how when they go to rescue Charlotte, they arrive while there is a Halloween party happening. And when Phoebe enters the party, a man tells her that, he can tell the first letter of the name of her true love by an apple peel. And he peels the apple, it falls into the water, and then it makes the form of a C. And at this time, she of course says coal. But then I was thinking, how awesome is it that this is something they may not have done it on purpose, or they could have done it on purpose. But in the future, we know Cole isn't her end game, but her future spouse, whom she does marry, have children with, etc., also starts with a C, is a Cupid. And I thought that was great that they like kind of carried that over. So it still holds true that her true love started with a C. It just wasn't Cole. Though for a while it is Cole. I also like how they kind of had Prue complaining about how she can't meet any good guys, and then that's why she doesn't have a date for the Halloween party at P3. And then when they go into the past, she has this instant connection with Micah. They lock eyes, they stare at each other for a while to the absence of the rest of the world, and then he lets them go. And then even after they get caught the first time and are set to be hanged, he comes back and cuts them down so they don't actually end up hanged. And then when Prue arrives, she meets someone in the present who looks exactly like him, and he mentions how, he feels like they've met before, and she says that she thinks the same. The only problem with that is that he's a single episode little supporting character that's barely beyond a flirtation. They just go to dance in the present time. And obviously Mike in the past ends up getting killed for letting them go. So it's not even enough to really call it a supporting relationship, but that was a nice connection. And as I'm as I've thought several times on the show, it is a little bit frustrating that they have a lot of like single episode flirtations. And it's like if you're going to give them a flirtation, would it be so hard to have it last a couple episodes at least? Kind of like what they did with Jack. I mean, it's a TV show, not reality, so budget, maybe they actually can't. But it is a little frustrating that they keep bringing in these almost love interests. There's a little flirtation, a little chemistry, a little flirting, and then poof, they're gone the next episode. We never see them again. It would be nice for them to carry over at least a couple episodes, like I said. I also think that it's interesting how, like, when we had that 70s episode, the reason they thought they didn't have their active powers in the past was because they had existed there and only one set of them could have their powers at a time, and it was their younger selves who had their powers. But now they've gone further back and they still don't have their powers in the past. So I'm thinking that just in the past, if you try and travel to the past, you're just not going to have your powers in your present time bodies. But the reason that they give in this episode is that the powers that they are getting don't exist yet. Or because they inherited the powers from Melinda, who was able to use all three of them, it could also maybe be that because Melinda exists, their powers are with Melinda at the time that she is being born, and that's why they don't have it, similar to that 70s episode. I think it's something to consider. And then obviously I do like the Leo and Daryl sort of bonding, how Daryl at the start knows that, like Leo is in on the secret, but he doesn't know that he is necessarily supernatural or what exactly Leo is. But throughout this episode, Leo obviously has to show his powers, his orbing ability to get them away from the Grimlocks, and then later his healing ability. So Daryl does in fact find out that Leo is not human. There's also a little bit of a quip at the start where Daryl is wearing his rookie uniform, which he doesn't need now as an inspector, but back when he was like a regular street cop, he had his cop uniform and it still fits. And then Leo makes a comment about his also fitting from his rookie days. And of course, he's wearing the World War II uniform because that is when he was human, which of course at first confuses Daryl until of course he finds out the truth about Leo. But I thought that was a little bit of a funny moment. All in all, like I said, everything about the episode was great, and that is why I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. I do, though, think Once Upon a Time was just slightly better because I love the fairies and the trolls and the like comedy of the childhood. So Once Upon a Time stays in first place, but All Hallows Eve comes in second as another 10 out of 10 episode. Magic Hours in third, and then in fourth we have The Honeymoon's Over. Which now brings us to our series ranking so far, where we are ranking each of the seasons against each other. So on our mostly objective side, we so far have season 2, and that ended with a score of 75%, putting it in first place so far. Then in second, we have season 1, which came in at 73.18% as its final score. Season 3 so far has gained 37 points out of 220, which matches the personal ranking, which also is at 37 out of 220. However, on the personal side, Season 1 is in first place with a score of 71.50%. And then Season 2 comes in second with a score of 56.82%. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Charmed Season 3, Episode 4, All Hallows Eve. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.